Now, what can I really say about Gollum that hasn't already been said by countless different streamers, game journalists, YouTubers? But to be fair, I don't even feel like you should be listening to those guys anyways. Most of them didn't even beat the game. Instead, you should be asking me, the guy who spent over 150 hours playing this game. Well, did you ask me? Okay, yeah, this game is shit. Yeah, so if you aren't aware, Daedalic Entertainment literally released an apology letter regarding the state of this game on release, and following the pile-on of the backlash, this 15-year-old studio has now completely shut down the development side of their studio, and they're only focused on publishing now. This is quite unfortunate because this studio is responsible for some pretty fun point-and-click adventure games. I've never played them personally, but I have heard good things. Daedalic was also contracted to make another Middle-earth video game, but with this news, I guess that's not happening anymore. And I guess this means we're not getting that performance patch. Or at least I thought. Yeah, amidst me working on this video, a performance patch did release, namely fixing the performance issues and a handful of different soft locks and game crashes. And alongside those updates I'm most emphatic about is they finally fixed wall running. I don't want to get into it, just pre-patch wall runs were really bad. They actually kind of messed up with releasing this patch because the more games function on the main menu, apparently it was easily exploitable, and one of the guys in the Discord was able to add and delete games, or really do anything you wanted if you felt like it. Yeah, but I'm just giving you guys a heads up that this speedrun was developed by the best minds that this planet has to offer. The same people that made these, and who also figured out that Gollum was a real file name. But let me guess, some of you guys are here because you're like, wait, this game has a speedrun? Have you been living under a rock? We went Twitter viral and Kotaku viral. Sure, there's only 2 speedrunners and one of them is me. Sometimes big things come out of small packages. And even with limited resources, I think we put together something pretty cool. You know, usually on this channel, you guys see me speedrun a bunch of licensed game 3D platformers from the early 2000s. These are the games that I'm by far the best at, but I feel like it's rare that I ever get to show off my routing and glitch hunting capabilities. Usually these old games have dedicated communities with routes that have existed for years, and I'm usually just learning what others have already found rather than coming up with my own strats. But never would I guess that a shitty, early 2000s-esque 3D platformer would get released in the year 2023. So when this came up, I already knew it was my time to shine. Because videos like these take so much time to create, I often have to post them well after the initial hype of the game is over, but honestly it's much more important to me to make a thorough speedrunning video that'll stand the test of time and still be relevant even a year from the day it is posted, rather than posting it as soon as possible. I've dumped 200 hours into this video. I've spent $400 in speedrun bounties, load remover commissions, video game itself, the fucking DLC emotes, because I was kind of hoping those would save time. They don't save any time. But that being said, if you guys appreciate the effort and enjoy these types of videos, I would really appreciate it if you dropped a like, either before or after, doesn't matter to me, and just let me know what you think about it. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this game. I cannot wait to show you guys everything that we found. It's gonna be sick. But before I start getting into this amazing speedrun, I really don't want to inspire anyone to play this game, because today's video is actually sponsored by a game that's way better than Gollum, Raid Shadow Legends. You see, in Gollum, you just get to hop around a bit and pick up some tags as one of the most pathetic creatures in the Lord of the Rings universe. But in Raid, you can play as over 700 unique champions with intense PvE and PvP content, with graphics that would knock Gollum straight into a pit of lava, all from your mobile phone. In Gollum, the toughest boss is this weird looking dude named the Candleman. Yeah, pretty lame. But what if I told you Raid just came out with one of its toughest in-game bosses yet, called the Hydra. The Hydra is a clan boss with 6 heads, with each head being so powerful, they're essentially a whole boss battle on their own. There's the Head of Suffering, which does as the name suggests. It has this unique special effect called Pain Link that shares the damage you deal to it with you, making it an absolute pain to deal with. There's also the Head of Decay that has a passive effect that every time you heal a teammate, they lose max HP, slowly making your teammates weaker over time. And then one of the most devastating is the Head of Wrath that after being hit 15 times will unleash its vengeance, tripling its attack, dealing massive damage. The rest of the heads I'll leave as a mystery, so if you want to try out this boss, you'll just have to get the game. If you download Raid today using the QR code on screen or the link in the description, you'll start off with this epic champion, the Drake, and by using promo code JTSkin before October 7th, new players can get their hands on the epic Stag Knight champion and also the Stag Knight skin designed by JonTron. Special thanks again to Raid for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the speedrun. So this game starts out 66 years after Bilbo Baggins obtains a One Ring from Gollum. After Aragorn captures Gollum, turning him over to Gandalf, he's transported to Elven territory in Merkwood for questioning. The first half of this game is essentially Gollum retelling the past 5 years he had spent in Mordor. His story begins in the Shadow Mountains of Cirith Ungol, where he has kept himself hidden. In the intro cutscene, Gollum is seen muttering to himself, repeating his classic catchphrase, Gollum, Gollum. He looks up and begins chasing after a crow that he believes was sent to spy on him. This is essentially just a tutorial level with no advanced speedrun tricks, but it will be a good spot to explain some of the base mechanics. Like I said earlier, this game is a 3D platformer, so Gollum has a lot of the basic abilities you would assume him to have, like a sprint, crawl, jump, and climb. Sprinting drains Gollum's stamina extremely quickly, which I'm assuming was done because if he is able to run for even twice as long, it would trivialize most of the stealth sections. So to get around quicker, I'll jump shortly after initiating a sprint to preserve the speed boost while not losing stamina. But not only do jumps like this preserve speed, Gollum actually moves faster during a sprint jump, so it's best to just spam jumps as much as possible. You'll also notice me restarting checkpoints occasionally after walking over them, and this is beneficial because it replenishes Gollum's health and stamina, and with a load remover, it does actually save time in most cases, but wouldn't save time on console since that doesn't have a load remover. The fastest way to climb walls is by jumping, and we can either go up, backwards, diagonally, or just fall downwards. And yeah, for the most part, time saves in platforming sections are pretty straightforward, although are kind of annoying. This game was just not made to go fast. Even just trying to record this first level, Gollum would grab a ledge and just let go for no reason, and an even more hilarious example is right here where it says my controller disconnected. I mean, yes, my controller did disconnect, but not because it was unplugged. This game is so cursed, sometimes it disconnects all my devices, including my speakers, and crashes Chrome, and I know it's this game, because otherwise, this never happens. But just when it comes down to basic mechanics, this game is so inconsistent. In most 3D platformers, you can usually gauge your distance from a ledge or a platform, and make an educated guess on whether you'll make the jump or not, right? Well, in this game, climbing mechanics are just so unforgiving, practically every jump needs to be choreographed and practiced ahead of time if you want any semblance of consistency. Anyways, after running around for a bit, eventually we'll make our way to the top of the mountain, nearby an orc encampment. Avoiding the first handful of orcs is pretty simple, as we can just run straight past them. But in doing so, we'll alert 2 orcs, making them aware of Gollum's presence in the mountains. Eventually we'll reach up to the crows, and Gollum just kind of flounders about, scaring them away. Then he spots a beetle, so of course he chases that as well, and falls down a cliff right into the orcs' territory. We end up catching back up with the 2 orcs from earlier, and overhear that they plan on reporting Gollum to the higher-ups, so Gollum begins following them to prevent them from doing so. This will be a trailing mission, where we have to follow behind these guys while not moving too far ahead or behind. Luckily, there are only 2 missions like this in the entire game. What's unique about trailing missions like these is that if the enemy spots Gollum, you'll get game overed instantly, opposed to any other stealth challenge where the enemies will have to physically catch him. There is an optimization we can do here, at least used to be able to do before the game got patched. By going to the main menu and reloading the game would break the orcs' AI and make it so they couldn't interact with Gollum, allowing us to run through the section much quicker with them chasing after us, and by climbing to the top of this wall would reset their aggro, making them go straight back to the normal path. I guess this mechanic was bug reported in other areas, as it would also break quest NPCs later on that you have to interact with to progress, so it's a good thing that they did fix this, but it does kind of suck that the only speedrun strategy in this level no longer works. But it didn't even save them much time anyways. After making it to the end of this area, we'll get to use Gollum's signature move and throttle the first orc. Anytime we sneak behind an orc that isn't wearing a helmet, we can kill them. But for the speedrun, we'll only be killing orcs that are required for progression like this one. Since the second orc is wearing a helmet, we'll instead throw a rock at this lantern, making it so he can't see, causing him to fall off the ledge right into the giant spider Shelob's mouth. Moving on, we'll have our first internal monologue discussion with Gollum and Smeagol, where they argue on whether a beetle is harmless or not, as, who knows, it could also be a spy for all we know. For the most part, I'm going to skip over these segments, as they're pretty lame, and rarely actually change the course of the game. But I'll just try to select whichever options get me out of these segments the fastest. Gollum then chases a beetle around until he's spotted by a guard, and is chased into a cavern. From here we'll just jump through the area straight into these wraiths, ending chapter 1. In a following cutscene, Gollum recants being tortured by 3 Nazgul, forcing him to tell them that Baggins is the one that took the One Ring. Now, before we move on to Chapter 2, I did say that there was no advanced speed tech for Chapter 1, but that doesn't mean we don't have ideas. So generally how this game works is it loads in levels in chunks as you hit specific load triggers, because otherwise if full levels were loaded in, the game would be even laggier than it already is. But interactable objects like grabbable ledges, ladders, and also NPCs are always loaded in no matter what. This is because whenever a checkpoint is saved, the game needs to save the location of all these different entities, which is impossible to do if they aren't loaded in. So where I'm going with this is that the wraiths that we run into at the end of the level are actually loaded in from the very start, and by using cheat engine tools to jump into them allows us to finish the level early. The problem is the location they're loaded in at is way up in the air out of bounds, and the only ideas we currently have for reaching them would be by performing a swim in air. Yeah, that's right. Similar to games like Sekiro, Spyro, and many others, this game has a swim in air glitch. By diving into a body of water that leads out of bounds, keeps Gollum in a swimming state even if he's no longer in water. Basically any body of water can work to initiate this glitch, even ones that are essentially just small puddles. The only drawback is that the height that you can swim up to is capped by the height of the body of water, and unfortunately the pool, which has the highest elevation I could find, doesn't come anywhere close to reaching the wraiths. Furthermore, diving in water slowly drains Gollum's stamina, and when he runs out of stamina, it then begins draining his health, and when he runs out of health, he dies. So even if we did have a higher elevation, we still probably couldn't reach the wraiths. So I guess the devs win this round against the speedrunners, but there's still a lot of levels to go, and I definitely have some tricks on my sleeve for some of the later levels. Leading into Chapter 2, Gollum is thrown into the slave pits within Barad-dûr. I guess it's worth mentioning now that the majority of the lore in this game isn't canon with the movies or the books. Apparently the game developers consulted Tolkien experts who inferred what Gollum may have been doing between the gaps, and this is what they came up with. We're next introduced to our new cellmates, Cruel Orc and Frail Man. These characters do have real names, at least the Frail Man does, but this game is supposed to be from Gollum's point of view, and most of the names they put are pretty funny, so I'll just be sticking with those. We're given a tag that's required to be carried around the tower, and are also given the nickname Grashneg from the orc. For our first day, the Frail Man will be leading us to the tower, teaching us how to perform the necessary tasks. The first task we have is herding these beasts called Boroks into their pens. When walking with the Frail Man, movement is restricted, so it's a little faster to run around the Beastmaster, jump on this piece of wood sticking out, and from there, jump onto the invisible wall. This trick is pretty difficult, not just because of Gollum's janky movement, or because of how small the invisible wall is, but it's because we can't take too much damage when falling down, because at this point, we don't have any food, and there isn't an opportunity to get any earlier. Some falls deal 1 damage to Gollum, others do 2, and any fall that would do above 2 damage instantly kills him. I'll normally get out of the section with 1 health, which can definitely make running from the Boroks pretty stressful. But after getting the first group trapped, the rest is pretty straightforward from here. After trapping the remaining Boroks, we'll be sent back to the Beastmaster for our next task, and head into the mines for some manual labor. Due to heat exhaustion and stress, several miners have gone missing, and have presumably died in the mines, so we get tasked with running around the area until all 8 tags are collected. There aren't really any strats here. In fact, you may notice my movement in some areas isn't even that optimal, but that's only because you can't interact with certain objects while dialogue is playing, so even if I got to the tags early, I wouldn't be saving any time, so I just choose the path of least resistance to preserve health. The only thing special I can really think I do here is collect some food throughout the level, and then jump off some ledges instead of taking the ladders down, saving some time, but of course dealing a bit of damage to Gollum. After collecting the tags, we'll take the wagon back to the slave pits and get introduced to the Tower of Light, which is this area that certain slaves get sent up to. Slaves seem to be sent for all sorts of different reasons, ranging from insubordination, treason, or maybe you just looked at a guard funny. The reasons aren't always made clear, but nobody ever resists being summoned to the tower, nobody knows what occurs there, and most importantly, nobody who goes up there ever comes back. However, since Gollum has special privileges with his insider information regarding the ring, he's never sent to the tower. And yeah, after heading back to our cell, we'll conclude the first day. For day 2, you'll never guess what we got going on. More chores. And not just ordinary chores, but these are tasks that are chosen specifically for the least valuable slaves called Dirt Eaters. Which doesn't really make sense to me, because I thought Sauron wanted Gollum alive, so it would probably be best that he doesn't die in a mineshaft, but I digress. Some explosives have been planted at the end of these tunnels, so we have to head down all 3 tunnels, light the barrels, and then escape before being exploded. This is where the speedrun starts getting interesting. After we hear Gollum ask why, Frailman's dialogue will continue as we head back through the tunnel from which we came, and I'll just chill by this candle over here until the dialogue ends and the checkpoint updates. Despite us standing all the way over here when the checkpoint saves, when we reload, the game places us near the Frail Man, which essentially teleports us over the loading trigger for the tunnel to the left that would normally be loaded in when walking down that portion of the hallway. Or at least that's my working theory. This is done because, well, again, this game is horribly optimized, and other than a few exceptions, levels are loaded and deloaded in chunks as you progress forward. So when you skip over or around these loading triggers, entire sections of the level will stay unloaded, which we just call deloads. I actually found 2 deloads during my casual playthrough, one which wasn't really of any use, but then another that had potential to skip an entire level later on. I also found a video by Wishing T-Call, who also discovered a few, but I reached out to her only to discover that they were found in a pre-release version of the game and had reported the bugs already, since these deloads literally prevented her from being able to progress. She also didn't have the original footage anymore anyways, so we weren't able to reverse engineer anything from this, but it did give us some insight into what type of glitches might be possible in this game. Also, I guess I should elaborate that when I say us, I'm referring to the extremely small and niche Gollum speedrunning community. But this would be a good time to introduce the other main glitch hunter for this game, other than myself, Zumo de Papaya, who is actually the one who found this deload strat. Like I said earlier, there are 3 barrels that we have to ignite in order to finish the level. We did test out skipping past the guards early, and also tested out only completing the 3rd barrel, which did move the quest marker back up to the foreman, but unless all 3 are activated, we aren't able to finish the level. I actually didn't figure out the optimal way to do these barrels until I started writing this script, because what we were doing before was going down the deloaded hallway and doing the 3rd barrel first, then coming back and doing the 1st, and then ideally the 2nd tunnel last. But because we were doing the 3rd barrel first, this would cause the Frail Man to get warped over to the foreman, and he wouldn't open the 2nd door. So in my speedruns, I was performing a dangerous out of bounds clip just to be able to get to the 2nd door. But in hindsight, I realized I could just do the 1st tunnel first, and the deloaded hallway would stay deloaded. So while running to the 3rd one, the Frail Man would open up the door to the 2nd tunnel, and I wouldn't need to do the wall clip anymore. This deload saves a bit of time since the Frail Man is so slow, and doesn't do anything until he finishes speaking, so we don't need to wait for the 2nd door to open, nor do we have to wait for him to walk all the way to the 3rd. One more thing I'd like to point out before moving on is that before the game patch, just before igniting the 3rd barrel, I used to quit out of the game back to the main menu to reload in that deloaded part of the level so I could just run back through. But for some reason, doing so in the patch version leaves it deloaded, so now I have to do a somewhat tricky jump back across. It's almost not even worth pointing out, but I wanted to point out every speedrun trick that was affected by the patch since there are so few of them, and other than this, and the one I mentioned earlier, there are only 2 other tricks affected by the patch. Anyways, after finishing up the final barrel, we can head back to the foreman and finish the level. Because we did the barrels out of order, sometimes the Frailman will try to walk to the 3rd barrel, which is kind of funny to watch, and the dialogue that plays is a dialogue from the 2nd barrel, rather than what should be playing at this point. After he finishes talking, we can still end the level like usual, and we'll confront the cruel orc. Normally we'd give him some bread to skip a cutscene, but I'll just threaten him anyways for our amusement. Several days will pass and we're now on to the next level, the Rattler. Now I did say there were a few changes made in the patch that fixed some tricks, but in this case, the update actually made this level quite a bit faster. But I guess this doesn't really matter, because this level does have a full level skip. Instead of following Frail Man at the start, we can walk over to the right side of this area and crawl to wedge Gollum into these rocks. This clips him slightly out of bounds closer to the wall, allowing us to get behind this orc, and then once we get behind the orc, we can use him to fully clip out of bounds underneath the level. Interestingly enough, the end of the level is located underneath the start, and since like I stated earlier, all interactable objects are always loaded in, finishing the level early is possible. Zumo did some testing, and although Gollum wouldn't be able to latch onto any of the grabbable ledges due to falling too fast, it was possible to land on this ladder and slide down it to cancel Gollum's momentum. Normally in this section there would be a grabbable wall to the left of the ladder, and while we can't see it, it is still there fully intact. You can also see that all the NPCs are kind of glitched out since the area isn't properly loaded in. But if they do spot Gollum, they will catch him, which is especially difficult since the orc with the light that's normally supposed to be patrolling the area is stuck in a fixed position, staring right at the crate we need to get into. But by crawling along this invisible wall, all the way to its edge, performing a precise sprint jump, it would be possible to land on the crate and finish the level instantly. So shout out to Zumo and Kirigiri for figuring this one out. Unfortunately, this trick wouldn't be doable until over 20 minutes into the speedrun, and if you miss the ladder jump, you would have to do the entire out of bounds clip sequence again, each try. So I opt for using a safer strat that still skips half the level. I'll start at this level with the classic endeavor of following the frail man around. We're essentially planning a breakout with the frail man, and to do so, we need to get some maps from the Hall of Grond. And the only way to the Halls of Grond is to ride the Rattler. And the Rattler is a lift that carries a cage located at the end of the level. I mean, obviously, right? We're then sent to the sewers by the frail man and dive straight into a pit of Mormac, which is this dark water that is produced after the slaves are taken to the Tower of Light and comes down in channels to feed the beasts of Mordor. Yeah, I mean, they could have just said blood or whatever. I don't know why they have to keep making up random words, but yeah, moving on. After escaping out the goo, we'll run past some more Boroks, climb up a few walls, and eventually end up at this lengthy stealth section, which is where I'll be performing the next skip. Whenever Gollum is jumping, crawling, sprinting, or walking, all of these activities affect his collision dramatically. In this case by falling into this candle in the corner here, walking into the wall to clip through it a bit, and then crawling will allow me to clip out of bounds. From here I can walk around the entire stealth section and head straight towards the end of the level by where the ladder and crate from earlier is. Now this section used to be extremely luck-based, mainly due to the guards being stuck in these fixed positions we saw earlier, making it almost impossible to get past. For this reason, I would usually alert the guards on purpose to drag them down the ramp away from the cage, and then run into the cage when they weren't there. This gave mixed results, and you'd also have to wait for the guards to lose suspicion before you could enter the crate, costing a ton of time. But because the new patch changed how the game loads, now when we reach this area from out of bounds, it actually loads in correctly, meaning once we get here, we can just finish the level as intended. The guards aren't nearly as much of a pain since they go in their normal walking patterns, and we could just slip by unnoticed, removing this RNG nightmare altogether. For the next level, we've finally made it to the Halls of Grond, which is where all the heavy artillery and weapons are stored and presumably created at. The goal for this level is to collect some maps, and is honestly one of the more lengthy platforming stealth sections in the game. And we're going to skip basically all of it. While excluding the end level skip in the previous level, since it's not actually used in runs, there are 3 extremely difficult tricks in the speedrun that really stick out compared to the others, this being one of them. This was initially found by Zumo. At the start of the level, there are platforms just out of reach with orcs on them doing construction. Zumo jumps on this torch at the start and uses it to jump over to one of the platforms. From here he does a series of jumps around this rock, jumps off the head and chisel of another worker to get even higher up, and then finally does a jump onto this beam and begins running across it to end the level. This beam is normally what carries a wagon from the end back down to the start, and funnily enough, Gollum can actually walk on it, all while enjoying the view of Grond. Also, apparently the maps aren't needed to complete the level, so all we need to do is finish it to enter the wagon, ride it down, and the level is complete. But yeah, like you'll hear me say a lot, this method of performing the skip just wasn't going to be viable for runs. The main reason is because it required using an inconsistent tech called a double jump. See, Gollum doesn't actually have a double jump, but sometimes in weird cases he can interact with certain walls in such a way to get an extra jump. The only problem was in this case, we need to do the double jump after doing the difficult jump to this platform, getting our first jump off this wall, and then a double jump, and even then there's still so much that could go wrong. For all intents and purposes, double jumps are pretty much just luck based, so cutting as many of them out of the run as possible was necessary. I did some digging around, and it didn't seem like there would be any alternative to doing the trick like this, but then I came up with the idea of trying to climb up the rocks from out of bounds instead. It took me a couple hours of extensively looking, but finally, I did stumble on a way to clip through. It all starts over by this corner where I could fall into this hole. I'd then clip my way through using the plank on the left side as a guide until I felt I was clipped up far enough. After this, I would hold right and wait till I see an opening to jump through the wall, and then once I saw it, I would mash jump and hope for the best. And assuming everything worked correctly, I would be out of bounds. This clip method was extremely difficult, and I only really had the trick down to a 50-50 consistency, because if you miss the timing to jump through, the game would place you back in bounds into this tiny red room where you just get soft locked. A couple other runners attempted to learn this trick, but I was the only one that was able to find any sort of consistency with it. Mostly because I was the one who found it, of course. Horror game speedrunner Eric Dices was messing around trying to speedrun this game on stream, and was getting a bit frustrated at this level, because when trying to do my version of the out of bounds clip, he kept accidentally jumping back in bounds through this door. So in an effort to get back out of bounds, instead of doing the clip, he mash jump at this door, and then he randomly managed to get out of bounds again with a double jump. You see, I did look into using this door, but I gave up pretty early on. But apparently the trick here isn't to jump straight into the door, but instead jumping into the wall to the right of the door to do it instead. We'd still have to perform the tricky torch jump, but overall this was a much more consistent method of getting out bounds. From here we'd then need to perform another tricky double jump to gain height, this one being much more rare to hit compared to the one at the door. But since we could just rinse and repeat attempts, it was viable for speedruns. What's funny is in the segmented run we're watching, everything you see here I did in one take on my first attempt, which definitely would have been a sick segment for a real run. But yeah, after entering the wagon, the level is over. After finishing our ride in the wagon, we'll be confronted by orcs who are suspicious about what Gollum was up to, but only think that he was trying to skip out on work. To punish him, and I guess also punish anyone playing this video game, they send us on another task to collect more tags at the fiery lake. There's only 3 tags to collect here, and the only optimization I could really find was to jump on his wall to get to the other side, since our movement is restricted here due to the heat, but not when we're jumping across the wall. Afterwards, lava will explode, knocking out Gollum, but somehow he just wakes up near the frail man and some of the other slaves. Our next plan is to sneak up into a tower to light another stack of barrels and blow the place up. I guess this is just an act of vengeance, because I really have no idea how this will help us escape. But yeah, there aren't really any strats here despite there being a pool of water, which we probably could use to swim in air. The problem is any level where we need to climb upwards most likely won't have any significant time saves, opposed to just climbing normally. Although this level does feature one of the most interesting climbable walls in the game. Let me introduce you to the inverted wall. Yeah, again, I don't know how anyone thought this was a good idea, but moving on, we'll just need to plant the explosives and then jump for cover. It would appear during the cutscene the crows actually were spying on Gollum, which is why he's being held for interrogation to see who is in charge of the conspiracy. As much as the frail man is my homie, I choose to rat him out, because by doing so avoids making the cruel orc our enemy, and he won't block our cell later on. As for how the story goes, it really doesn't matter who we choose. Despite proving loyalty to whoever we send to the Tower of Light, they will still prove to be Gollum's enemy within the cells, so Gollum forwards his allegiance to Sauron instead to get further access within the tower. In the final level of Chapter 2 will of course be another day of completing chores. Here we learn how orcs are created. They're made in what looks to be pools of Warmac, and here we'll need to go around to each feeder and feed the orcs while making sure we don't fall into the water. This level is pretty simple. I'll just take the fastest path to each lever, and once all 5 are pulled, we're done. There's a tricky jump I could do here to get into the wagon early, but other than that, the level is pretty much done. Obviously there's a ton of waiting we have to do on the wagons, and walking to our cell, which really can't be avoided in the speedrun, which is a big reason for why the speedrun is so long, and this game is just really long in the first place. But it is what it is, and other than me mentioning it right now, I'll mostly just skip over these sections. Gollum's master escape plan is almost in order. He just needs to get into the tower, go through the sewers, get into one of the carts to travel across the bridge, and he's home free. But the frail man points out that the orcs always check their carts, and he definitely would be discovered if he tried, so Gollum needs to find his own chauffeur if he wants to get out of here alive. Anyways, for the next level, the sorcerer in charge of the Tower of Light, known as the Candleman, wants to speak with Gollum, so we are sent off to speak to him at his office. When we arrive, the Candleman is having a discussion with the lieutenant of the tower, the Mouth of Sauron. This conversation takes a little over 2 minutes long, and normally we just have to wait for it to play out for the door to open. But Zumo figured out that if we get into the room early, we can hit the trigger to proceed. I did some digging around and found a pretty consistent clip by crawling into this table. From here I can just jump my way around and hop right into the cutscene trigger. The Candleman is very aware that Gollum was responsible for the explosion in the mines and further questions him on who else orchestrated the attack. This time we can just blame the mine foreman, and he'll take the fall for it even though he wasn't involved at all. In fact, it doesn't even make much sense for him to blow up his own mines. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this level. For the next, we'll start at the level talking to the Candleman's daughter, and then have to follow the tower guard to the bird tower breeding chambers. However, if we just jump off from the staircase, we can avoid needing to walk with the guard, and can sprint jump all the way to the Candleman instead. Here for some reason Gollum needs to breed a bird, and all I need to do is put 3 logs in the fireplace, pump it 4 times, grab an egg, dip it in this liquid to make the default brown bird, place it in the nest, pull the lever, and level is complete. After a few hours, an adorable bird will hatch out of the egg, aiding us on our adventure throughout the game. No idea why Gollum is breeding birds rather than eating them, but yeah, that's the end of this chapter. The Candleman enlists Gollum as his new personal servant to keep an eye on all the slaves within the pits to keep tabs on them. Several years pass and Gollum has worked his way up through the ranks as a Candleman's henchman. On this day, he's greeted with a new, fluffier inmate that's given the typical name for all newbies to the tower, Grashneg. Not gonna lie, this level's pretty boring. We just need to give Grashneg the same day one experience we had with luring the Boroks into their cages. This is more done just to introduce the player to the companion system, where we can command Grashneg's movements. There's some very slight optimizations we can do here to get Grashneg from point A to point B a little quicker. For the most part, it's pretty straightforward. We did test out seeing if we could clip out of bounds and just lure the Boroks with Gollum instead, but the whole area is really bugged out if you try, and it just won't work, so we have to do it this way. However, during this experience, Gollum learns that Grashneg is actually a cart driver, so he sucks up to him a bit to get him on his side and hopes to use him for his escape. Afterwards, we are sent to the tower to visit with Candleman, who questions Gollum further about Baggins. I'll just spam Gollum dialogue options here, as they're the quickest, and then we'll have another companion section this time using the bird. It's kind of weird because this companion section feels way more like a tutorial than the prior one, and the companion mechanic just kind of seems silly as a whole, since after this, we literally have one puzzle in the game that even uses it. Anyways, all we have to do here is train the bird. At first it won't listen to us, so we'll chase it around, give it some bread, use it to knock over the jar, and click the figurine inside. Afterwards, Gollum will need to put the bird away. Just like before, I can do the same out of bounds clip with this table to clip load the office, and run around out of bounds to the lift, and if I hit the top part of the loading zone, I can skip half the next trailing mission. What normally occurs here is at this point the Candleman's daughter searches through the office with several other guards spying on his work, as her allegiance lies with Sauron and not with her father. She discovers that her father will be meeting up with an orc named Snara to discuss things like the Shire and also Baggins, so she leaves to intercept the meeting and questions Snara herself for the information. It's in Gollum's best interest to prevent the daughter, and by extension Sauron, learning any more about the ring, so he follows her and hopes to get to Snara before she does. There isn't much we can do to save time during the trailing mission, but luckily this is the last trailing mission in the game anyways. Gollum overhears the daughter asking about Snara's whereabouts, and finds that he's located at the top of the lookout, so we'll just need to climb up to the top before she gets there riding the lift. Once we get to the top, we'll throttle Snara, preventing him from leaking any information on the whereabouts of Baggins. At night while Grashneg is sleeping, Gollum is approached by the orc feeder, who has a deal with him to exchange certain goods in return for bread. However, this time Gollum gives him something better than the flask he's looking for, and gives him information on who killed Snara. In the morning it is revealed who Gollum ratted out, and it turns out to be Grashneg. Grashneg is transported to the execution chambers, and Gollum's master escape plan is finally in motion as we head into chapter 5. As we ride the wagon, Gollum explains to himself that the plan is to get the key for the tower where we bred the bird at. Then climb the tower to the execution chamber, wait for Grashneg to get transported there, and escape with him through the sewers, and then finally escape out of Mordor on a cart. Getting the key for the bird tower kinda takes a while to do so what if we just skip that completely? Right when we load into the lobby, we can head towards the door that leads to the bird tower, and get behind this guard. The way I like to do this is by crawling until I'm wedged in a good spot, and then release to get Gollum behind. From here it's pretty easy to just clip through the door. Once clipped through, we can see the bird tower area isn't actually loaded in yet. But by walking forward, we can hit an invisible trigger to open up the door behind us. This progresses a checkpoint trigger ahead, and tricks the game into thinking we've completed half the level, so after this is done, if we restart the level won't completely reset, but it will restart us back to where we should be by this point, and the bird tower will be loaded in, skipping the need for collecting the keys. From here we'll climb up the bird tower, and there really isn't too much to point out here. I did find a couple minor skips during this climbing section, but nothing that saved enough time versus the amount of risk the strats were worth. There's one section near the very end where we can jump from one wall to another, skipping a small section, and then once we're at the top, we get this epic jumping animation across the gap to finish the level. In the next level, we'll now be in the heart of the Tower of Light. It's up here that we learn more about the fate of the people that are sent up to the tower. There's this bright red crystal in the center, and when it glows, it dissolves all living things and turns them into the Mormac, which then seeps below into the sewers. While traveling through the Tower of Light, I'll need to avoid placing Gollum within view of the bright light for too long, or he'll take too much damage and die. I do have some strats to get around this. First, I'll just want to jump onto these grabbable railings from as far away as I possibly can to move faster and conserve stamina. After the first light cycle ends, I'll get a checkpoint while holding onto the railing, and anytime I get these checkpoints, I can reload it to reset my stamina, health, and even the light cycles. I'll continue taking advantage of this, allowing me to have enough stamina to avoid a bunch of grabbable ledges, and eventually prepare to perform a half-level skip. By dropping down from this ledge and avoiding the spikes, I can slide Gollum down this wall. Afterwards, I can jump onto this corner of the platform, which is pretty precise because the devs didn't really want you standing here, so the surrounding area is all death planed except for where I'm standing. Afterwards, I can just simply jump to the end of the level. From here, we'll see Grashneg's wagon come into view, and we'll hop onto it to release the hook and fall down into the sewers. So you would think if they fell into the sewers, maybe they would have just dropped into the water to survive. But no, they fell all the way up from a tower, right onto a hard surface while in a metal cage, and lived. Anyways, for this next section, we have one of the worst puzzles in the entire game. Not only is this a water level, it's literally a water puzzle level, and this is where we would see most casual players of this game just straight up quit. Whether it's due to how difficult or unfun the puzzle is, I don't really blame them, but for us speedrunners, we have 3 options. This was by far one of the most sought after skips in the game, as neither I nor anyone else could come up with any skips for a good while, so I decided to put a bounty on whoever could find something. And you'll never guess who pulled through. Zumo. First, I'll show you how I do the puzzle, which you can already see me doing in the background. This is another, and thankfully final companion segment of the run. We pretty much just need to command Grashneg to press each lever to change the water levels to allow Gollum to reach the top levers to drain the entire sewer. I'll just keep commanding Grashneg along until I can get him to go to the lever here. While waiting for him to climb the ladder, I'll run over to this lever and pull it, wait for the water to go down, and then pull it again, and quickly hop onto this platform. Honestly, I can't even remember the way you're intended to do this puzzle anymore, but this is definitely a solid exploit to go straight to the first necessary lever to drain the water gate. And yes, there are a lot of levers in this area. From here, I'll head over to this platform and command Grashneg to pull his lever again, and while he does so, I'll move one barrel from this platform to the other and push the other one off my platform so that it raises me to get up to the final lever. Once it's pulled, the water will drain, and we can proceed with finishing the rest of the level. Normally we'd have to wait for the water to fully drain, and then wait for Grashneg to slowly climb down and walk all the way over to us to open this gate. But by using this barrel, I can perform one of the easiest clips in the game to bypass it. And yeah, this is a mostly intentional way to beat this puzzle that I currently do in runs just due to consistency, but there are still 2 other strats we can do. The next strat is also viable for speedruns, and is essentially a half sewer skip. Basically everything we did in the prior segment is the same, except after opening the first water gate, we'll want to jump on top of this pillar. From here we can hop around to another pillar, climb up this wall, crawl under the spider web, and then jump onto the spider web, and use it to clip us into the ceiling. From here we'll need to do a series of jumps onto these grates sticking out, and then fully jump out of bounds. And if done correctly, we should end up on the top of the level. From here we can drop back in at the end of the hallway towards the end of the sewers. At first glance this does seem quite a bit quicker than the other route, but after dropping down, we have to walk all the way back to the sewers to hit a trigger, before walking all the way back up again, making it only barely faster. And due to the trick being less consistent than the other route, I personally don't do it in my runs. But Zumo wasn't done here. Despite already claiming the bounty, he went on to find a skip to bypass the entire sewers. This trick I have yet to perform once, even in practice, because these first couple of jumps are just so difficult that I already knew I wouldn't even bother attempting this in actual runs. The concept is pretty much the same as before, using the spider webs to clip the roof after gaining enough height, and then using that to skip to the end. Despite this not being viable for speedruns, it's still really cool to know that a full sewer skip is even possible, and I'd say it was money well spent. Going back to the speedrun, we'll need to take out 2 orc guards, which is easy enough. Apparently in the recent patch notes, they patched a bug allowing players to skip having to kill these guards before entering the cart, which isn't even a skip we were aware about, and still have no idea how to perform. But I guess at some point, under certain conditions, this could have been a legitimate strategy. Anyways, we'll grab a tag off of one of the orcs for Grashneg to use, and then have him lead us across the bridge. Once at the end of the bridge, Gollum will command the bird to ring the bell, the gate will open, and we'll head through, ending the level. In the next level, Grashneg will approach a checkpoint, and although the guards give him a hard time, he is able to proceed through since he has a tag. However, the crate that Gollum is in is marked and is not meant to leave the tower, so the guard sees it, and Gollum is separated from Grashneg once again. He ends up in a room with an orc dissecting some spiders, presumably researching the species to find a weakness to gain access to Shelob's cave. By walking for a bit and then running past the orc, we can reach the lever to this lift without getting caught. After a lengthy elevator ride, I'll make sure to hit this checkpoint on my way through, otherwise if I mess up anything, I'll have to ride the elevator again. Next we'll perform one of the more interesting out of bounds tricks in the run, by walking into this wall. It seems they forgot to put collision on this wall specifically, allowing us to get out of bounds with ease. From here I can hop around from outside the level, climbing around the rocks. This is one of my least favorite out of bounds platforming sections, because Gollum does not interact with the rocks very well at all, and some of the jumps are pretty precise. Also need to make sure to hit certain load triggers to make certain sections of the level load in ahead of me, otherwise I won't be able to continue. This skips about a third of the level, but eventually I will reach an impasse where I need to head upwards. In this room there will be a bunch of spiders on the wall, making this one of the most difficult sections to progress through. The spiders are fast, easily alerted, and one bite does half of Gollum's health. And no, he doesn't get any iframes, meaning you can pretty much just get one shot if you get bit by 2 spiders at the same time. Once climbing to the top, I can let go of the wall, land on these rocks, and jump across the gap to skip about half the section, but still, none of this is very easy. I'll then be at a crossroad where I either need to head right or left, and where I go doesn't matter, just as long as I'm able to get around the spiders here without dying. The rest of the level we just play as intended, and maybe do a couple of tricky jumps to save time here and there, but at this point, the difficult part of the level is over. Once finishing, Gollum will begin to be chased by a horde of giant spiders, but at the last second, he finds a lever to close a gate, keeping them trapped behind him. From here we can start climbing up to begin looking for Grashneg. Once we get to the top, there's a couple of little skips we can do. Normally we'd have the typical Gollum vs Smeagol argument on whether or not to kill the orc below, but we can skip this by jumping into the bars here, since they forgot to put collision on them as well. Next I'll run around the stealth section, perform a tricky jump around this gate, and continue to proceed forward. We'll run past Grashneg, who doesn't have any more room on his cart, and claims that the orcs are looking for both of them, so it would be best if they just split up until getting outside. Getting outside is easy enough, as there's only a few orcs we need to sneak past. There is a skip that Zuma found here to do it all a bit quicker, but I found it way too unreliable to perform, so I just do this whole segment as intended, and I'll just pick up from where we are once Gollum gets outside. Once outside, Gollum spots Grashneg, but after making eye contact, Grashneg abandons their deal and takes off with the cart without Gollum, so we'll need to find another way back to the mountain without him. I'll proceed through the next area sneaking around the orcs, and by sneaking around, I really mean just running past them mindlessly. There aren't really any strats for this section, and you sort of just have to hope that orc at the end doesn't block the top of the ladder, otherwise there isn't any way to get past. Eventually we'll reach a bridge, where a bunch of carts are passing under, and we can hop on one of them to make our way out of the area. While on the cart, we'll have to dodge a couple of platforms, hide from some orcs, and other than the typical janky Gollum controls, it's fairly easy to get past. Once at the end, we'll climb up till we reach this massive gap, and then jump across to finish off chapter 5. Gollum resumes hiding in the mountains once again, just like the beginning of the game, but this time can't stay here for too long since he's being searched for. The only way out of the mountains would be through the spider tunnel, past the spider queen Shelob, who Gollum has a past alliance with. However, she's sick of being fed orcs, and most likely won't let Gollum pass without being fed something else. Most of this section is the same as chapter 1, and we're just following our bird around, recanting about our memories of Deagle, the close friend and relative of Gollum that he killed to obtain the ring. Eventually we'll reach the top of the mountain again near the orc camp, and spot a familiar face, Grashneg. Since Grashneg doesn't even know Gollum is still alive, we'll stay hidden climbing around the face of the mountain out of sight. Grashneg is searching for the spider cave, as Gollum told him that was the way out of the mountain. However, purposefully leaving out that there's a bloodthirsty giant spider waiting for him deep down inside. Along the way, we can hear Grashneg disparaging Gollum, claiming that he hopes that he got eaten by orcs. Eventually Grashneg will reach the camp, and nearly walks straight into it, so Gollum drops a log alerting the Boroks, and leads Grashneg away from certain doom. Eventually we'll stumble across him again, and drop a ladder leading him out of a pit. Gollum will convince Grashneg to follow him, as orcs are heading in their direction. Which isn't exactly a lie, I suppose. Upon reaching the cave, Grashneg sees some spider eggs and gets suspicious, but Gollum informs him that a giant spider used to live in these tunnels, but is long since deceased. So yeah, you can probably see where this is going. Following this level, we'll be heading straight into Shelob's lair. At the start, we don't have the ability to sprint, so we're forced to just hop through the caves for a bit, following Gollum's previously placed markers. Later, we'll let down some bridges and continue leading Grashneg through. Grashneg will begin to point out that there's an awful lot of fresh-looking corpses and skeletons about, but Gollum will continue to encourage him to keep moving forward. Once we get to the end of the cave, we'll have the Shelob boss fight. Or I guess it's more of a chase, similar to a Crash Bandicoot level, or I guess a better example would be the spider chase in Jak 2, or at least if you bought the chase sequence off Wish. Yeah, this whole sequence just isn't very fun due to bad instructions from the devs. When I was first riding this game, I did discover that the steep cliff at the end of the tunnel, before we climbed to Shelob, was actually the end location of the spider chase, and if we jumped into it, we could finish the level instantly. But of course, the problem would be finding a way up there first. Initially, I did figure out a way to do this by performing a double jump, but this was just crazy unreliable, and the only way to get into the spot for this double jump in the first place was with another double jump, and I was only able to pull it off with save states. I did find a few spots to clip out of bounds as well, but nothing seemed to be working out, so I put out another bounty, and of course Zumo claimed it in a few days. Zumo found an entire out of bounds route around the outside of the caves to get enough height to platform across most of the objects on the ceiling. The only problem being, the clip to get out of bounds was super tough. Either way, I paid out the bounty, and then looked around seeing what other options I could come up with. At some point while I was spamming jumps in a corner, Grashneg walked underneath Gollum, and I was able to perform a jump off him to get on a ledge with a really easy to perform out of bounds clip. With this in mind, the trick was finally viable for speedruns, albeit extremely difficult, as this is one of the 3 difficult tricks I was talking about earlier. After performing the initial out of bounds clip, I would jump onto this ledge, which conveniently progressed the next dialogue options, and I'll purposely wait here until they finish. This is because a checkpoint occurs after they end, meaning no matter what I do, I will always be able to get back to this point. Afterwards, I'll have to get Gollum to stand on this ledge, do an awkward jump around the platforms, and then start platforming around the ceiling. Like most things, this is way more difficult than it looks, as I am jumping on very specific spots on these outside rocks, as most of it doesn't actually have collision. I'll then jump across this gap, climb up this wall, clip into this hole in the wall that's sticking out, and if I perform everything correctly, I'll be able to jump straight to the end, skipping the boss completely. At the end, we'd be able to make the decision to betray Grashneg, or warn him about Shelob had we not done the skip, but either way results in the same outcome. Despite several warnings to not light his lantern, he does it anyways, alerting Shelob, and becomes spider food. Due to Grashneg being a 5-course meal plus an appetizer for Shelob, it allows Gollum enough time to escape to safety, ending chapter 6. At this point, we have finally caught up with the real events of the game towards the end of the interrogation session with Gandalf. Our new location is in elf territory in Merkwood. After being escorted out of the cell, we get jump scared by a blind elf named Mel that lives in the cell on the other side of the room. We'll continue being escorted by the elves until they drop us off with a different group of elves while they go talk to the king. Gollum, wasting no time whatsoever, makes way for his escape out of Merkwood through the river path. The river path is quite long, and despite me looking all over the place for optimizations, an optimal casual route was really the best thing I could come up with because any out of bounds routes would result in the level not loading in, and towards the end of the level, we'll have to do quite a bit of climbing, so any swim and air tricks would be useless. Upon reaching the end, Gollum is confronted by the elves and informed that the land is surrounded by a wall of haze, and no matter how much time he spends trying to walk through it, all paths lead back to the elves, so really there's no way out for Gollum without their permission. Well, I guess unless you're Gollum's bird, because it somehow still managed to find its way over here. In the next level, we're escorted by the elves as they give us a little more information regarding the Wall of Haze, and we learn it was created by the king's nephew, Gwendol, a master of both spells and riddles. Gwendol, however, died a long time ago with all his fellow scholars in a tragic mission to finish creating the Haze Wall, with the only survivor being Mel, who instead lost her sight. Gollum continues to pry for more information from the elves about Gwendol, but they advise him to go speak to Mel about it instead. Because, you know, a blind depressed elf would definitely want to discuss all aspects of her past trauma with Gollum. But of course this is Gollum the video game, so when we head inside, she does agree to speak with us after delivering some wine. And also after Gollum lies to her, claiming that he overheard Gwendol was in fact still alive to pique her interest. He continues lying to her, telling her that he overheard elves saying that Gwendol was spotted in the forest outside the haze. But if only there was a way out of the haze, then he would be able to help her find him. Mel, being the desperate elf she is, looks past the fact that Gollum is a creepy stranger and requests that he looks for a silver bell as it's needed to break the spell on her door. However, after looking for a few days, he comes up empty-handed. She tells him that he should probably look for it in the king's chambers, so we make our way through an area called the Glittering Grotto that will lead us to the doorstep of the chambers. This area is actually fully accessible before even talking to Mel, but unfortunately none of the triggers are active, meaning we can't do anything like a full level skip, but there are a few skips we can do here. Firstly, we're meant to ring 2 bells to raise the water levels, granting us passage to the higher levels of the grotto, but we can skip these completely. The first bell can be skipped by jumping around these rocks to climb up this wall, leading to the second tower. At this point, we're also meant to visit Gwendel's chambers to collect a shell from his home before we can ring the second bell, but since we'll skip the second bell anyways, this is also able to be skipped. To do this, I'll climb up the second tower, and use these boxes to clip Gollum out of bounds. This can be a bit tricky, but once I clip through, I'll drop down into this corner to break Gollum's fall, and slowly start dropping down to the bottom level, where I can clip back in bounds, right where we would be after ringing the second bell. There's one more small skip I can do at this point to avoid having to climb along a beam, and can just jump up to this platform. And even with skipping pretty much every objective in the level, once I reach the top, I'm still able to complete it. The shell we are meant to get from Gwendel's home gives Gollum the ability to breathe underwater, and with this ability, he's able to make it to the king's chambers, which is where we'll perform the third, and probably most difficult skip of the run. To get into the king's chambers quickly, instead of taking the normal route, I can clip out of bounds using this lamppost to get past the door. Located above the harp in the king's chambers is the silver bell, but we don't actually need it to finish the level. Normally what occurs here is after grabbing the bell, the king returns with Gandalf to his chambers to have a heated discussion regarding Gollum, Sauron, and the One Ring, although Gandalf mostly keeps the One Ring a secret from the king, as the king only knows that Sauron is seeking a great power, and Gollum is involved in some way or another. This is just a boring stealth mission where we need to hide until after the conversation ends, and wait for the door to open. But if we're able to get outside the door before it opens, we can just end the level immediately. When I first started looking for a skip here, I initially began testing using the swim and air glitch using an elevated body of water that would reach the height of the door, which was able to work. The only problem being, we didn't have enough health or stamina to fully reach the doorway. I then attempted to search for a location near the door from out of bounds that maybe Gollum could reach with a limited time, and then make my way to the end. But unfortunately from out of bounds, there's pretty much nothing to stand on. Yes, nothing to stand on, except for one object sticking out of the chambers. Once I located this object, I began testing the corner of these curtains to see if I could somehow manage to clip through, and miraculously, after enough time, it did end up working. This is because behind the curtain was a platform large enough for Gollum to stand on, even for just a moment, and by doing so, I could then walk forward for one step, causing a lunge to occur. This lunge would shift Gollum's collision in such a way that made it possible to clip through. However, this would be the most inconsistent trick in the entire run, as even if you got the clip, sometimes it wouldn't fully clip through. The main premise when it comes to wall clips like these is that when Gollum clips into something, he's able to continue clipping through even more things during that period. So if you don't get the full clip right away, it's most likely just not going to happen. Anyways, after clipping out of bounds and jumping around the door, I can hit the loading zone and finish a level leading to the King's Gardens. Here in the King's Gardens, the elves are on high alert looking for Gollum. What's interesting with this level is by jumping off these ledges from the start, I'm able to jump onto some invisible walls and make my way into the river. It's just kind of funny that the invisible walls are put in place to prevent Gollum from reaching certain locations, but in most cases, they just end up being convenient platforms to jump off of to skip stuff. But what isn't funny is after performing a swim in air from out of bounds and swimming to the end of the level, we're not actually able to finish it, and this is because of one reason. This level doesn't end when hitting the end trigger, but instead it ends after hitting the final dialogue trigger and letting the dialogue play out. So by doing the level completely out of sequence, the dialogue never plays. That's why instead I have to jump to the spot on this wall to get the elf's dialogue to progress. I also need to stay out of view from the one currently speaking, because if they detect me, it will cut the dialogue short and I won't be able to complete the level. Once this dialogue plays through enough, I'll run onto this pillar which will trigger the next dialogue calling for the guards. Next I'll hop onto these trees and this invisible barrier, and then land on this pillar, and then hit the ground to hit the second to last necessary dialogue. Now from here I just need to get to the end of the level as quickly as possible. I'll do this by climbing up this tower and jumping off it onto this invisible wall, and then fall down the waterfall to skip most of the rest of the level, and by dropping down here we'll also hit the load trigger to fully load in the end area. From here I'll just need to sneak past these elves, climb up the building, and once I get to the top, the final dialogue will activate and the level will be over. Gollum makes his way back to Mel's room, and she diverts the guards' attention the other way, giving them enough time to clear out. This level is pretty boring, and we just have to lead Mel through the river path from earlier. We'll walk up to the waterfall near here, and she'll just straight up Moses the water right out of the way, leading to a hidden path taking them to the Merkwood Forest. Meanwhile, back in Mordor, Gollum's bird makes its way back to the Candleman, and he uses the bird to learn Gollum's whereabouts. He informs the Mouth of Sauron of his location, who then advises him to infiltrate Merkwood to steal Gollum back, dead or alive, to prevent him from leaking even more information about the ring. The Candleman is hesitant to start a war so early, but the Mouth reassures him that the enemy getting a hold of the ring would be even more devastating than any war, so he pressures them to move forward with the invasion. Shifting our focus back to Gollum and Mel, we are now into Chapter 8, moving through the Merkwood Forest, heading towards the bell tower. First, Mel will have us climb a tree to grab a lichen out of it, and tells us that eating the lichen will make us immune to the truth bugs in the upcoming path. Gollum then has to decide whether or not he trusts Mel enough to eat it. I believe the devs made a mistake when programming this selection, as Gollum is the one that doesn't trust her, so he wouldn't be the one eating the lichen, meaning Smeagol would be the opposite and would be trusting of her. But if we choose a Gollum option, it results in him eating the fruit he's skeptical about. Either way, this will be the option we'll want to choose, because walking through the truth bugs will force Gollum to walk really slowly, and he'll begin having hallucinations, making the section really slow. Next we'll have to wait for Mel to calm the river so we can pass. I did do a lot of testing here in an attempt to get past this river, but didn't have any luck since not only is there a massive invisible wall surrounding the area, but the devs disabled jumping and sprinting here, so there really weren't many options in the first place. After making our way past the truth bugs, we'll arrive at the bell tower, and use it for shelter during the night. Per usual, you can't interact with anything like the door until Mel's dialogue ends, but by purposely going the wrong direction, causes the game to reposition Gollum, cancelling our dialogue out, allowing us to open the door early. Next we'll need to run around the area collecting food for Mel to eat, like mushrooms, moths, and caterpillars. Yeah, she isn't too pleased by that by the time we get back. The bird returns to Gollum. Mel can tell something is off about it, but she's not quite sure what it is, and they head to bed regardless. During the middle of the night, Gollum is woken up by a strange voice and notices some weird creatures flying through the air outside. Mel is nowhere to be seen, so we'll need to trek back through this area again while avoiding the purple clouds. If we are to touch one, they do half of Gollum's health bar and also disable jumping for a short period of time. There is a trick we can do here to skip half the section though. Normally we'd need to leave out the back exit of the bell tower to get back around to Mel, but I found that mashing jump after skipping all the cutscenes and then restarting the checkpoint would for some reason cause the front door to reopen. I have no idea why this works, and it only works about 50% of the time, and since you only get one attempt at it, it was just another luck-based trick. Either way, after making it to the end of the area, we'll get jump scared by Mel again, who says she made her way through by following a familiar voice she believed to be Gwendel's, so they head in deeper to the gate to breach the haze. In the next level, we're led to the border of the Elf Realm, where Gwendol and his mentors were all lost attempting to close the breach. You see, this area was the final area the team needed to seal off for the Elven Realm to be completely hidden from the Mirkwood, and while it seems they were successful in closing it off, all but Mel would receive the same fate. In order to reopen the breach, Mel needs to know which of the Menors were standing at each stone that surrounds the tree in the center. And while I do find the lore somewhat interesting, this is literally the worst puzzle in the game, and at some point I considered quitting during it. We're meant to run around the area searching for clues, and without identifying certain items, we don't get the option to select those members for the stones. At least for the speedrun, I know the bare minimum items I need to interact with to unlock all options, and already know the locations for each stone. I'd say the worst clue they put in here was the sword at the bottom of the lake, because as far as I know, this is the only time you ever interact with an object underwater in the whole game, which just threw me off so hard I didn't even bother looking in the lake because that wasn't something we ever had to do. Anyways, after putting all the correct names in each stone, Mel casts a spell to relieve the wall of haze. This exerts a fair amount of energy, so she has to rest, but seeing as Gollum has gotten what he wants, he approaches her from behind, attempting to throttle her just as he had planned. We'll need to choose either a Gollum or Smeagol option, and neither one matters for the speedrun, but if we choose a Gollum option, he'll choke Mel out for a short period of time before having flashbacks of Deagle. And if we choose the Smeagol option, he will attempt to convince Mel that maybe the Riddle Master isn't alive, but that's okay because now she has Smeagol as a friend, but then he deters to a similar mental breakdown about Deagle. Also, I think it's pretty funny with the use for the deagle model, as it's pretty much just Gollum in a Shaggy cosplay. Either way, the sudden outburst will scare Mel away, and Gollum will head into the haze alone. Now, I'm not exactly sure if they changed this area or something since the patch, but for some reason, even after walking around for 10 minutes, even I got lost in the haze, and kinda just gave up on it. You know, even after doing several speedruns of this game. I have no idea why they had to make this so confusing, but, yeah. After exiting the haze, we'll just end up returning back to the breach area, confronted by some elves, since there is no way to progress through it without Mel. Leading into chapter 9, the elves are still searching for Mel, but it doesn't seem like they really care much if she comes back or not. In order to save face, Gollum has begun helping some of the elves with some tasks, like collecting lights for the cook. However, the king has had enough of babysitting him, and is more interested in the information that he told Gandalf. He orchestrates the elf guards to lead Gollum to some truth bugs to get him to reveal the information. Gollum, who overhears this plan, gets a hold of another lichen and eats it to avoid leaking any information, and this whole level really just has nothing going on in it. The elves lie to Gollum, telling him a light is in the king's garden, when in reality, it's a swarm of truth bugs. Yeah, they really try to fool him into thinking bugs were a fucking light bulb. Either way, Gollum tosses the truth bugs onto the elves, forcing their tongue on Mel's whereabouts, but they truly don't know where she is. He presses on and asks about Gwendol, and learns that there's a hidden room behind the mirror in Gwendol's house. Gollum breaks into this hidden room, and is telepathically communicated to Gwendol, although this kinda freaks him out, and he throws a light in the room on the ground. But I suppose this light is good enough to use for the cook's lanterns, so we return to her and fix them. In return for fixing them, the cook invites Gollum to the party they have planned at the King's Grove, and this is where the run starts getting interesting again. So in this level, we're meant to participate in the festival, like I said before, but the orcs are still coming for Gollum, and shortly after Gollum's bird reappears, a horde of orcs show up, taking over the festival. Normally we would have to trek back through this area, while hiding from the orcs, and then escape through the trees. But instead I'm going to do a full level skip. To do this, I'll start over by these pots inside this tent, and jump into them to clip through both the building and the invisible wall placed behind it. Then I'll start jumping to the left until I can jump off the invisible wall onto a cliff. Everything over here is considered out of bounds, and once I get to this jump here, I have to be very careful because landing anywhere other than the small corner is completely death planed, and Gollum will instantly die if I move anywhere else. From here I'll just need to hop up a couple more cliffs, and then down at the end of the level. During a portion of the level, Gollum overhears that the orcs had captured Mel from the other side of the haze, and had used her to get past the wall to infiltrate the festival. So in the next level we'll make our way to the ruins where they're located to rescue her. The next level is pretty much just a continuation of the last. We're still running through the forest, attempting to make it to the ruins. To do this quickly, I'll head over to these logs and begin trying to wedge Gollum between the log and the wall until he clips through into a nearby body of water. From here I can dive once to reach the end of the water and swim in air to the next body of water. The benefit of doing this is that whenever Gollum dives, his stamina gets reset, meaning I can swim faster for a longer period of time by continually replenishing his meter. Eventually I'll swim over to this portion of the level that's half loaded in. Normally this area is supposed to have rushing water flowing throughout it that you're not even supposed to swim in, but since we avoided the load triggers, I can walk through it on foot. It's also pretty interesting that I have just barely enough resources to progress through it. Eventually I'll hit a trigger for the enemies to spawn in the deloaded area, and I'll need to avoid them, but thankfully they only do 1 point of damage each time, so getting hit isn't that big of a deal. Once I clear past the enemies, the level will fully load back in. But this portion of the level doesn't involve any climbing, it's just a straight shot to the end. In the next level, we're finally at the ruins, and we'll need to traverse through a maze before reaching the ruins gate. This area is pretty difficult to route for a speedrun, because you're within such close quarters of the guards that you're pretty much forced to wait, or else you'll otherwise get caught. But during my casual playthrough, I did find a deload for this level, so I knew that one existed. I just need to figure out an optimal setup. After a long time of testing, I wasn't having any luck, as the beginning of the level seemed pretty much bulletproof with how the invisible walls overlap with the actual walls. At some point I got soft locked during testing, so I restarted my checkpoint near the opening to the maze, and, well, I somehow caused a deload to happen purely by accident. Now I wouldn't call this deload consistent, but it was consistent enough for runs, and all I'd have to do is run through the opening gate and quickly restart the checkpoint. From here I could walk around the loading triggers for the maze and bypass all of it. However, the most recent patch fixed a lot of these checkpoint loading defects, and the trick no longer works, which is the main reason why I'm not able to do runs of this game right now until we find an alternative route. But what's funny is while recording for this video, I decided to randomly mess around in this area, and I did somehow find another way out of bounds. And from here I was able to perform the trick like usual by avoiding the load triggers to load in the maze. So with this being found, it seems like a nearly identical route will be able to be put together for this run, even with the patch, which is pretty cool to see. Anyways, while running through the maze area, I also found that by bumping into this tree over here would activate the loading trigger to load in the end of the level, so I'd bump into that, all while keeping the maze deloaded. From here I'd then head straight to the end of the level. Once we arrive, we sneak up on the Candleman, but Gollum's clumsy ass falls onto the ground in front of him, blowing his cover, instantly getting himself captured. You see, at this point the ring is no longer the main focus for the Candleman, but instead the source of the elven magic located within these ruins, which is also needed for Gollum to bypass a haze. The Candleman will force us to complete a puzzle, organizing the lights on the door to look like a deer to open it up. Once the puzzle is complete, the door will open, blinding everyone surrounding it, but with Mel being blind, she's able to guide Gollum inside, leaving the Candleman and the orcs behind them, leading into the final chapter, Chapter 10. While we're here, we'll have to perform some simple tasks like pulling some winches and opening some gates to get deeper inside the ruins. Gollum asks Mel how she was discovered, and she explains that it was actually Gollum's bird that found her first, and then the men came afterwards. So at least they're finally catching on that although the bird is adorable, it is kind of evil in a way. Anyways, as we make our way deeper within the ruins, we'll reach the Queen's chambers. Some weird stuff is going on with the elven magic, causing the furniture to float around, and we'll hop across the objects to get to the other side of this door. But upon reaching the other side, the door is already opened, and Gwendol appears out of nowhere consoling Mel, instantly turning Gollum into a third wheel. We'll begin following Gwendol, who will continue leading us until we finally reach the source. Apparently the haze is all out of whack, and the only way to heal it is to head down the separate halls and close off the sources that feed it, one source being air, and the other music. Listen, I didn't write this shit, but there really is no way around all of this, so I'll go ahead and head down the right path, and Gwendol will head down the left. All we need to do here is platform around until we reach a pulley at the end of the area, and leap of faith right onto it to close off whatever is powering the source, and then head back. After returning, Mel explains that Gwendol has yet to return, and begs Gollum to go look for him. Normally we're supposed to jump up the floating platforms to get up here, but with some clever platforming, we can avoid this, and just jump without them. After clearing through the area, we'll find Gwendol injured from climbing up the rocks. I did actually test out doing the left path before the right to see if we could just skip the right side altogether, but it's only after completing the right side that Gwendol spawns over here. After speaking with him, he'll raise up these platforms, allowing us to reach the second pulley. Afterwards, Gollum will have a series of different arguments with himself, and the two outcomes that can come from these are whether or not to kill Gwendol. Smeagol wants to kill him to keep Mel as his only friend forever, and Gollum doesn't, as Gwendol is literally trying to help him escape, which would of course get him closer to the ring. For the speedrun, it doesn't seem to matter which option we choose, as we can just skip the cutscenes, so for the sake of this video, we'll just keep him alive. An orc will appear out of nowhere, and just as he's about to kill Gwendol, Gollum will jump down and throttle his lights out, saving the day. After arriving back at the source, the Candleman is already there, summoning the Dark Lord to take control of the magic. So at this point there's only one option, to destroy the source altogether. I'll wait around here for an opportune moment to hop onto one of these floating platforms, and then keep hopping around them until I get to the top. A beam attached to a chain will be found sticking out of one of the platforms, and after jumping onto it, Gollum will thrust it into the ball, disrupting the magic, causing an explosion. Weirdly enough, the Candleman can be seen moving Mel out of the way of some of the rubble, and I'm not really sure why, but upon regaining consciousness, the rubble from the explosion will become the battlefield for the final boss fight versus the Candleman. Normally we'd have to platform around an obstacle course, avoiding crossbow shots, but instead by performing a series of jumps around the start of the area, we can jump out of bounds, jump straight over to the platform near the Candleman, and upon hitting the cutscene trigger, timing ends. Overall, a pretty underwhelming boss fight, even without the skip. We don't even get to throttle him ourselves. Just before getting impaled by a crossbow bolt, our bird begins attacking the Candleman, giving Gollum an opening to latch on, as the bird always had true loyalty to Gollum, with him being its owner. Gollum epically throttles the Candleman, and the day is saved. I guess it's kind of difficult to really call Gollum the hero in the story though, as everything he did was purely for selfish reasons. But then again, most of the fates of his earlier companions most likely would have been the same outcomes, with or without his presence. I guess with the exception of killing Gwendol, if you do choose that option. I mean, the fact it's even an option to kill him is kind of messed up, but I guess that's a pros of working with non-canon characters, as they're pretty much expendable. Since we decided to go with a good ending, we end the game with Gollum idly watching Gwendol and Mel lock lips. Afterwards, they inform Gollum that he is finally free. Although the elves will need to go back to the kingdom and inform the king that the haze is gone, and that they're no longer safe, but that's not really Gollum's problem. Gollum can see the elves are very tired from their adventure, and offers to watch over them as they sleep, and does the classic Gollum maneuver of nearly killing them. But he ends up leaving. And yeah, somehow the game still isn't done yet. We get another option of whether or not to kill the bird, even after it just saved us, and I don't know, even though it's a virtual bird, there is just something so unsettling about killing it, so I'll just keep it alive. Weeks later, Gollum is seen attempting to enter the Shire from the mines of Moria, but the door is closed off, and he's left to suffer by himself. The end. I do hope you guys enjoyed this video, as it did take me a ton of time to create. I did consider slimming this video down a bit, but in doing so would have made most of it almost nonsensical, even though a lot of the story is kind of already like that, and there isn't really a video out there that goes into most of the lore, let alone all of these speedrun strats, so I just wanted to produce something unique, and I hope at the very least I did that. Unfortunately with this game, there's so much downtime in walking, and waiting, and walking, and waiting, that the speedrun ended up being closer to 3 hours long, which is still significantly shorter than the base game, but this game is just really long, and there's only so much I could do. I'm still really happy with how the route turned out, and who knows. Now that the route has nearly been ironed out for the new patch, maybe I'll do some more runs. Before I end, I want to give a special thanks to the Gollum speedrunning community, namely the speedrun mods Spaghetti and Zojolix for adjudicating runs, Zumo for all the work he did helping us with glitch hunting, Cactus who basically reverse engineered the entire game and gave us quite a bit of insight as to how the game all works, and assisted with creating the auto splitter and load remover. Also thanks to Mysterion, who I commissioned to create the load remover, which was no easy job. Also thanks to Akira, who made the cheat table with save states and other useful features that allowed us to test tons of speedrunning related tech. And finally, thanks to anyone else who participated with me along this adventure, including you the viewer, because without you guys watching these videos in the first place, I wouldn't have the time to do any of this. Lastly, I'd like to give thanks to today's video sponsor, Raid. If you guys are interested in checking this game out and trying out the new Hydra boss, reminder that my link is in the description, or you can use the QR code on screen. That's all I have to say for today's video. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, as it's the best way to show support. Subscribe for more speedrunning related content, and as always, I hope you all have a beautiful life.